When George was young, he had a woman he liked. When she got divorced and returned to the country, I was forgotten in a heavy rain. That day, I borrowed an umbrella from a cleaner who was passing by. Then I went to the airport and bought the next available flight. I thought, I didn't care where as long as it wasn't with George and Shirley. At 6 o'clock, George's car returned home. It was the maid who came out to greet him, not his wife Vivian. It was then George remembered, because he was worried about Shirley, he forgot to pick up his wife from the market. But it was okay, his wife was gentle and wouldn't get angry over such a small thing. At 7 o'clock, the rain stopped, and the sky was very dark, but Vivian hadn't come back. George began to feel a strange uneasiness. He called her 3 times. The first time, no one answered. The second and third times couldn't get through at all. That sudden downpour seemed to make the sky dark in an instant. I ran awkwardly to the eaves to avoid the rain. I looked blankly at the pouring rain an hour earlier. George said he would come to pick me up. But now, there was no sign of him. The girls around me taking shelter gradually got picked up. Their boyfriends or husbands tilted the umbrellas over their heads, carefully protecting them. I thought, George must be lovingly protecting Shirley now. The woman he liked when he was young. But missed due to a twist of fate. I heard she suffered a lot after getting married. During the 3 months of the divorce lawsuit, Shirley's mother died as well. George often worried, losing sleep, and sighing. And today was the day Shirley finally got divorced and returned to the country. In the morning, George took a bath and changed into a newly tailored suit. The tie had a light mandala pattern. I took care of all his needs after we got married. But I didn't buy that tie. The rain continued endlessly, pouring like fried beans. But my heart suddenly felt quiet. "Auntie." I smiled and waved to the cleaner passing by. I exchanged the freshly bought seafood for her old umbrella. Seeing her delight, I couldn't help curving my lips as well. The umbrella was old but could still shield from the rain. Better than a man who didn't come. I walked out of the market and flagged a taxi on the roadside. At the airport, I realized I had nowhere to go. I only had my grandmother left. But if I went to her, she'd know something was wrong. In the end, I bought the next available flight. I thought, anywhere was fine as long as it wasn't with George and Shirley. 3 years of marriage, Shirley silently filled my life. I couldn't bear it anymore. As I boarded the plane, my phone suddenly rang. It was George calling, but I decided not to answer. When the ringing stopped, I put his number on the blacklist. George returned home at 6 o'clock. When the car stopped, only the maid came to greet him. He paused and took off his coat, but didn't hand it to the maid. Instead, he draped it over his arm. "Where's Vivian? Hasn't she come back yet?" George's steps halted. Then he remembered, Vivian had gone to the market to buy seafood on a whim. He said he'd pick her up. But Shirley had fainted while crying at her mother's grave. In his haste to get her to the hospital, he forgot about picking his wife up. George glanced at the pouring rain outside. A faint sense of guilt crept in. Would Vivian be angry? But just as this thought came up, George shook his head with a smile. He'd never known anyone gentler and more kind-hearted than his wife. She wouldn't get angry over something like this. "I see you got caught in the rain. You should go take a hot bath," the maid suggested quietly. George nodded. "If Vivian comes back, tell her I'm upstairs." He went upstairs and took a hot bath. But for some reason, he felt uneasy in the bath. When he came out of the bathroom, he felt a bit stuffy in his nose. He wanted to take some cold medicine but couldn't find the medication box. George checked the time. Almost 7 o'clock, and Vivian hadn't returned yet. The rain seemed to have stopped, but the sky was darker. He took out his phone and called Vivian. The ringtone went on for a long time but no one answered, and he finally hung up. George frowned. This had never happened before. Vivian had never missed his call. Maybe the heavy rain caused a traffic jam or a minor accident on the road? George felt a sudden tightening in his chest. He quickly dialed again. But the call that went through just moments ago couldn't connect now. His frown deepened, and his expression grew cold. Patiently, he called a third time. Still, it wouldn't connect. He stood gripping his phone for a long moment. Then he checked online. Turned out, when this happens, it means you've been put on a blacklist. George laughed, suddenly angry. He thought he should take back his words about his wife being the gentlest, kindest person he'd ever known. The plane landed in the unfamiliar city late at night. As my phone regained signal, new messages started coming. I noticed several texts from an unfamiliar number. "Hello Vivian, this is Shirley. I heard you and George argued because of me and you haven't returned home. I'm worried and sorry. I think I need to explain my relationship with George. It's true he liked me, but that was when we were kids. George always called me sister, and I've always seen him as a brother. Because of me, there's now a rift between you two. That's not what I wanted. No one wishes for George's happiness more than I do. Vivian, after reading my message, could you call George? Or at least let us know you're safe. I found it ridiculous. If you're really worried about my safety, there are countless ways to check on me. With George's background, finding my ID info is a breeze. But after I left home, the first person to look for me wasn't the police. It was Shirley. I really hate that Shirley always knows everything about my life so quickly." I didn't respond. But Shirley was very persistent and called. May answered. There was silence on the other end. A moment later, a low laugh came through. Then Shirley's voice, "Guess George isn't as good as you thought, huh? Quite tolerant of you to last 3 years before causing a scene." "Vivian," Shirley suddenly said my name, "since you're willing to step aside, George will give you more alimony." I laughed. "Shirley, you've been through a tough divorce yourself, so I'll leave it to you. If the money's good, I'll buy you coffee." With that, I hung up. Then I blocked her number and set up call blocking for all unknown numbers. On the third day after Vivian left home, George called her grandma who lived far away. After some small talk, he brought it up casually. "Grandma, Vivian said she wanted to come visit you the other day." "No need to. I'm fine. It's a long trip, don't trouble yourself." George held his phone, standing on the large terrace, watching the setting sun. His heart seemed to sink bit by bit with the sinking sun. He knew Vivian only had this one relative, so he naturally assumed she must have gone to her grandma's after their fight. But she hadn't. So, where had Vivian been these past few days? He turned around and saw the familiar dressing table. It was clean as usual, but her comb was left out. He walked over, picked it up, and saw a few strands of long hair tangled in it. Vivian had nice, black hair, never dyed or permed. He held the comb, lost in thought. Shirley's call snapped him back to reality on the second ring. "George, I was just passing by your garden and saw the roses have wilted." Shirley's voice was soft. "You should get the gardener to clean them up. It doesn't look good." "No need." For the first time, he refused Shirley directly. Shirley was taken aback but quickly said again, "George, are you angry?" "Of course, it's your home with Vivian, you two get to decide." Shirley's voice had a slight quiver. George softened. "That's not what I meant." "Any word from Vivian?" "No. It's my fault, I shouldn't have come back." Shirley started crying softly. George listened to her quiet sobs, feeling strangely irritated. Vivian rarely cried. Only on their wedding night because of the pain, she cried in his arms for a while. Then in their first year of marriage, when he missed her birthday. He recalled it had something to do with Shirley's husband being violent, and he was so worried he left to help her immediately. George felt strangely irritable. In 3 years of marriage, he never knew Vivian could be so stubborn and headstrong. He sat down on the bed. After thinking for a long time, he decided to call Vivian's only close friend. Her friend was surprised, saying she hadn't heard from Vivian. Vivian hadn't gone to her city either. George hung up with a shaking hand. He lit a cigarette but didn't smoke it. Vivian was a neat freak. When she was home, the whole place was spotless. His phone rang again, but it was an unfamiliar landline. He usually wouldn't answer such calls, but this time he picked up immediately. His voice trembled a bit. "George, it's me, Vivian." For some reason, hearing Vivian's familiar voice, George, who was usually calm and quiet, found himself snapping. "Vivian, you're not a child. Running away from home like this is childish. Do you know how bad this looks for the George family?" "Sorry." George gripped his phone, loosening his tie. The heavy weight on his chest seemed to lift. "If you know you're wrong, come back now." His tone softened a bit. "George, I have something else to talk to you about." "What is it?" "I sent you something. It should have arrived by now." "What could be so important?" "Just bring it back when you come home." Vivian's tone remained gentle. "I'm not coming back. Make sure to sign for the package. If there's no disagreement after you read it, sign it. I'll call you again in 2 days. This is a borrowed phone, don't call back, I won't receive it." "Vivian, what do you mean?" George felt his heart, which had just relaxed, tighten again. "George, I've been unhappy these 3 years of marriage. So, let's divorce." George said nothing. Vivian too was silent, as if waiting politely for his response. "Where are you now?" "That's not important." George glanced out at the dimming evening. "Vivian, what's this tantrum about?" Vivian didn't say another word. She seemed to laugh softly. Then, she hung up. George instinctively redialed immediately. But the person who answered was a stranger. She spoke in a language he didn't understand. He could only apologize and hang up. Twilight was descending, enveloping everything. He sat there, motionless in the heavy dusk. After 3 years of marriage, Vivian felt like a cup of perpetually lukewarm water at 45 degrees. She never got angry, never lost her temper. She always spoke gently. Everyone liked her and praised her. So much so that he almost forgot. The beginning of their marriage was just a resolution of a grievance between the elders for someone who could secure the position of George's wife with such a meager act of kindness. How could she possibly be as magnanimous, harmless, and devoid of scheming as she appeared? George turned and walked over to the dressing table, putting down the comb he had been holding. He saw his own reflection in the mirror. Furrowed brows, eyes filled with anger. Usually, he never showed his emotions. But now, even this small matter had him losing his cool repeatedly. George quickly returned to his usual expressionless face. He stepped out of the master bedroom and went downstairs. Shirley called to him from the downstairs living room, and he responded indifferently. He instructed the servant to bring over the parcels that had arrived today. George picked out the letter from Vivian and opened it. Shirley, standing beside him, covered her mouth and gasped softly. With a blank face, George tore up the divorce papers and threw them into the trash. George. Shirley stepped forward, gently tugging at his sleeve and speaking softly. "Don't be angry. Vivian must have acted impulsively. She's always gentle and understanding. I think it's my fault. If I hadn't returned to the country, if I hadn't troubled you with all these things, she wouldn't be upset." George's voice was cold. "What does it have to do with you?" "It's her own immaturity. If she's immature, isn't it because you indulged her?" Shirley forced a smile. "I've heard a lot about how loving you two are, even while I was abroad." She started crying before she could finish her sentence. George laughed coldly. "Why I married her, others might not know, but don't you?" With tears in her eyes, Shirley looked at him in disbelief. "George, was it really because of me?" George didn't answer. He just gently pulled his sleeve from her grasp. "I have something to do. Do you want the driver to take you back or do you want to stay here?" Shirley wiped her tears. "I'll wait for you here. I can't sleep knowing you're fighting with Vivian." George nodded, instructed the servant to prepare a guest room, and then told the driver to get the car ready. Then he left. Shirley watched him leave. She glanced again at the shredded divorce papers in the trash. She bit her lip and slowly sat down on the sofa. Why did George tear up the divorce agreement? It seemed like he had no intention of actually divorcing Vivian. The day I left, I knew George could find someone's whereabouts with ease. It just depended on whether he wanted to or not. So, when I saw George standing outside the inn that day, I wasn't really surprised. It was early autumn, and he wore a light gray trench coat, leaning against his car smoking. He was handsome and tall, drawing a lot of attention. In comparison, I looked ordinary. A loose cotton linen dress, hair lazily tied back with a handkerchief. No makeup, holding a grocery bag from the supermarket. I looked more like a maid from George's old house. When we first got married, I often felt inferior. But now, I had figured it out. Just like a simple home-cooked dish would never make it to a luxurious banquet table, George and I were wrong from the very beginning. He put out his cigarette and looked at me with his usual nonchalant expression. I put down the grocery bag that was cutting into my hand. George glanced at his watch, his voice sounding cold as usual. Go pack your things. 30 minutes should be enough. Did you sign the papers? I held out my hand to him. Give me the divorce papers, and I'll go back with you to handle the procedures. George's usually indifferent eyes showed a hint of deeper emotion. It's not the right time to publicly announce our divorce. Then don't announce it. Just handle the paperwork. Vivian, you know. Next week is the company's anniversary celebration. You have to attend with me. George curled his lips into a mocking smile. You have chosen a precise time to make a scene. But you should know, I'm not the type to be manipulated. I didn't say anything, just quietly looked at George. We had done every intimate thing a couple could do. But men could easily separate sex and love. Women couldn't. That rain didn't drench my body, but my heart was soaked. George would never understand because he never loved me. If you sign the divorce papers, I will attend the company's anniversary celebration with you next week. I will cooperate with whatever the company needs from me. I looked at him, even smiling gently like I always did. George, this doesn't put you at any disadvantage. Okay. He looked at me deeply for a long while, then finally nodded. After next week's company anniversary celebration, I will sign the papers. I didn't go back with George. I only flew back on the day before the company's anniversary celebration. To avoid gossip about our marriage, I returned to the marital home in his car from the airport. As I got out of the car, Shirley, acting like the hostess, came out to greet me. Vivian, you're finally back. She walked quickly towards me, holding my hand, her eyes red and teary. I looked at her indifferently. Her clothes, jewelry, makeup, all meticulously prepared. It was the kind of understated luxury that was very comfortable. Like the ladies of every wealthy family, hosting guests in their own home. I didn't say anything, just pulled my hand away. Shirley had beautifully done nails, a gemstone ring, and a diamond ring on her fair fingers. But I had nothing on my hand. I had taken off my wedding ring long ago, and there was even a thin callus in my palm. When I first knew about Shirley's existence, I stupidly compared myself to her in my heart. But now, no matter how beautiful and elegant she was, it didn't stir anything in my heart. I didn't look at her or respond. I just picked up my bag and walked past her. Shirley bit her lip awkwardly. The servant came over to help. Let me carry it. I smiled and declined, no need. The maid didn't dare say much, looking at George with some difficulty. Let her be. George looked away and headed toward the main building. But I didn't go with him. Instead, I went to the guest house. Vivian. George finally got angry. Maybe it was because what I did in front of all those servants made him and Shirley lose face. I didn't stop or respond. I had no desire to communicate with George. I just wanted our anniversary party to end smoothly. Then, our marriage could also come to an end quickly. When George and I linked arms and entered the banquet hall, the atmosphere was already at its peak. He played the part of the gentle and considerate husband, and I, as always, was the praised, gentle and virtuous wife. When chatting with others, he held my hand tightly. From time to time, he would glance sideways at me, his brows and eyes warm. I would look down and smile, but once, that smile was genuinely shy and joyful. Now, it was a mask. I despised this version of myself and hated him too. Just wished it would end sooner. But toward the end of the banquet, a plate of raw fish was placed in front of me. The faint smell of fish hit my nose, and my stomach churned suddenly. Losing my composure, I got up and hurried to the restroom, throwing up messily. When I stood up, I blacked out and fainted. The next time I opened my eyes, I was in the hospital. George's family had come, and George was sitting by my bed. He held my hand, with a rare look of joy on his face. "Vivian, do you know that you're pregnant? Just 45 days. His voice was low and gentle, as if afraid of scaring me. For a moment, I was somewhat dazed. George rarely had such tender moments. 3 years had passed by, and there were only a handful of times. And in those 3 years, his encounters with Shirley were also very few. But every time, he was extremely gentle. Only, his gentleness toward Shirley was because he liked her. His gentleness toward me was not for my sake. Now, it was just for the child in my belly. "Grandma already knows you're pregnant." He gripped my hand tighter, his smile soft. "I've already sent someone to bring her over. She's overjoyed." She was crying with excitement on the phone. I lay in bed, suddenly shedding tears as well. For 3 years after our marriage, I didn't become pregnant. It was a source of worry for Grandma. But Grandma never knew that I wasn't pregnant because George said he didn't want children. He wanted a few years of just the two of us. He had always been careful to avoid pregnancy. But why was he so happy now? After George's family left, the room quieted down. George brought me a glass of water. "Don't mention divorce again. Take care of your body and focus on the baby." I pushed away the glass of warm water. "I don't want this child." There was no change in George's expression. He looked down at me. "Tell Grandma that yourself if you can bear to make her heartbroken at her age." George was sure that for Grandma's sake, would continue to endure. But he forgot. When my grandma was young, she dared stand up to her parents. She dared to call off an engagement and run away, seeking refuge with relatives far away. When her husband became addicted to drugs, she dared to divorce him decisively and secretly took away her only daughter. Now she's old, looking fragile and kind, indifferent to the world. But I know, if Grandma knew about George and me, she would support all my decisions. George canceled all his business engagements. He started staying by my side full-time. My fainting at the anniversary and the pregnancy news had spread like wildfire. Reporters and media surrounded the hospital, blocking all exits. On the day of discharge, George's family came to pick me up with a grand gesture. Being married into George's family, having a loving husband, caring in-laws, and now being pregnant, seemingly made me a winner in life. It's laughable. When the world judges a woman's success, they often look at the assets men give her. No one focuses on her alone. No one cares how tumultuous her real life is. Shirley had already left New York. Her grandmother wanted her to go back and live with her. In the car, George held my hand. "From the beginning, I told you that Shirley and I aren't romantically involved. We grew up together. When we were young, she hurt her forehead saving me. There's still a scar. I really liked her back then, but now, I only see her as a sister. Vivian, you really have no reason to hold a grudge over such a small thing. But since it bothers you, I'll be more careful from now on. I won't meet Shirley privately anymore or have any other dealings with her." George gripped my shoulder, trying to pull me into his arms. "This is the end of it. We have a child now. Let's live well as a family of 3, okay?" Truthfully, at that moment, I almost believed him. I've heard that when a woman is pregnant, a hormone is released. That hormone makes her reluctant to harm the tiny embryo inside. In recent days, I've felt conflicted, entangled, and wavered. Grandma also told me, a husband can belong to someone else, but a child is always yours. Honestly, for an instant, I thought maybe this pregnancy was a chance given to me and George by heaven. No woman wants to kill her own child. I was no exception. But just as I was wavering, Shirley found a way to contact me. You know why George suddenly stopped avoiding pregnancy 6 months ago? I was stunned. It did seem like since then, George had stopped being cautious about birth control. Because, at that time, I decided to get a divorce. You might think George would be even more careful to avoid it. Shirley suddenly laughed. Her laughter was somewhat grating, somewhat sorrowful. Vivian, I can't have children. If I could, George would never have compromised to marry you, so do you know why your child is here? He is here to pave the way for me, and that's the only reason he's here. I shouldn't be telling you this now. I should wait until your pregnancy is more advanced, even until the child is born. But, Vivian. Her voice carried a burning jealousy. I've changed my mind. I'd rather see everything ruined than let you have George's child. I sat there, feeling a deep cold. The chill spread from my feet to the rest of my body instantly. But strangely, I didn't cry. Instead, I felt strangely relieved. I could sense it clearly. All my emotions and ties to George. They floated away, just like that. So, have you considered what happens if I insist on having this child? You're not that kind of person. You seem gentle, forgiving, patient, and tolerant. But you can't stand even a grain of sand in your eye. I suddenly smiled. Shirley, thank you for telling me this. Vivian, don't hate me. I just love him too much. You know love is always selfish and blind. I didn't say anything. I ended the call, stood up, and walked to the window. In the dusk-lit garden, almost all the roses had wilted. A gust of wind blew, and the last petal on the branch fell to the ground. The flowers had fallen. The dream should wake up now. The last time George and Vivian had dinner together. She wore a light green dress. The dress seemed familiar. He thought for a while and then remembered. The first time they met, Vivian seemed to be wearing something similar. Back then, he had lost the battle against his family. Shirley, heartbroken and desperate, had married someone abroad. He went to meet Vivian, intending to brush her off with excuses. But before he could finish the harsh words, her eyes welled up. George had never seen a girl cry so much. Her eyes were big, and tears pooled in them. It took a while before they fell. She choked out her words. I'm so sorry, I didn't know you were forced to see me. I'll go back and tell my elders to call off this engagement. She was crying so hard from his harsh words. Yet, she kept apologizing to him. George watched her stand up and knock over the coffee. The stain ruined her light green dress. She bent down to clean it, tears falling one by one. For some reason, his heart was moved a little. Thinking of his hopeless romance. Thinking of Shirley, who had married off. He felt a sense of resignation and went with the flow. Your name is Vivian, right? She was stunned for a moment, then nodded, yes. Do you want to marry me? She clenched her skirt hem, bit her lip. Her long lashes fell, covering her slightly red eyes. She nodded lightly, her face turning red. Then let's get married. She opened her eyes wide, looking confused and shocked. But you just... He smiled, leaning back in his chair lazily, looking at her. The George family had good looks. He was still young and a bit playful back then. He smiled at her that way, making her very shy. Just teasing you, Vivian. Please don't tell my grandmother. She hurriedly shook her head. I won't tell. After she said that, her ears turned red, and she didn't dare look at him again. After the date, he took her home. When she got out of the car, he held her hand. 3 months later, they got engaged. 7 months later, she married him. Now, she had been married to him for 3 years. She was carrying their child. George felt a strange emotion stirring in his heart. This child was part of his plan. He should be happy. But the happiness seemed to carry other meanings. Lately, he often wondered. Would the baby be a boy or a girl? Of course, it would be best if it's a boy. But if it's a girl who looks like Vivian, that wouldn't be bad. But why did he want the child to look like Vivian? His original plan was for the child to call Shirley Mom in the future. George vaguely felt that some things were starting to slip out of control. But he surprisingly didn't want to stop. He bizarrely wanted to let it all spiral out of control. That night's dinner was made by Vivian herself. She didn't have morning sickness that day and was in good spirits. So he let her do it. She even sipped a bit of non-alcoholic fruit wine with him. As he got a little tipsy, Vivian seemed especially beautiful. "Did you put on makeup?" "Just a little." "The lipstick looks nice." "Thank you." She smiled with her eyes curved. He smiled too. He stood up and went behind her, placing his hands on her chair's armrest. George lowered his head, his high nose brushing against her thick hair. It was an intimate moment. "Should I have the servants move your things back to the master bedroom?" She didn't nod, nor did she shake her head. She just raised her glass and toasted with him again. Later, he took her for a walk in the garden. The moon and stars were bright, and dried rose petals covered the lawn. She was very quiet during the walk. Only the early autumn breeze lifted the hem of her long dress. George followed behind her, feeling a little drunk. He thought the scene looked quite serene. Later, he couldn't remember if she moved back to the master bedroom. He slept deeply and for a long time. When he woke up, it was already noon the next day. He turned over, instinctively reaching for the other side of the bed, Vivian. His hangover made his head throb. He struggled to sit up. The room was empty, with only one pillow on the bed. She hadn't come to stay last night. And George didn't know then. Not just last night. From now on, Vivian will never come back here. After finishing the surgery, my grandma was waiting outside to pick me up. Even wrapped in a thick coat, I was still shivering with cold. As the anesthesia wore off, a dull pain started deep in my lower abdomen. Grandma placed a hot water bottle on my belly and held my hand tightly. "Vivian, come home with Grandma." Her body was slightly hunched, and her legs bent. But her hands were still warm and strong. It felt like she was giving me tremendous courage to move forward. I had told George's family earlier that we didn't want any gratitude. Now that it has come to this, Grandma doesn't blame anyone, she just feels for you. I leaned on Grandma's shoulder and said, "If you feel for me, then make me some egg custard. I haven't had your egg custard for a long time. From now on, Grandma will make it for you every day." I supported Grandma while she supported me. The noon sunshine fell on us, and I finally felt warmth on my body. As we reached the hospital entrance, I saw George's car. He got out of the car, his face stern and his lips pressed into a tight line. Grandma instinctively wanted to protect me behind her. But I shook my head gently. George strode over to me, grabbing my shoulders. "Vivian, where's the baby?" "Aborted." "How dare you, Vivian? How could you?" He clutched my shoulders, his fingers tightening gradually. I saw his pale, ashen face. His eyes churned with anger and pain. "Does it hurt?" "Good." I pried his fingers off one by one. "Please sign the papers quickly, let's get the divorce done." "I'm not divorcing you," George said coldly, enunciating each word. I was somewhat surprised but not too emotional. "Then we'll go to court. If you want to make a big deal out of it, turning our once beautiful story into a joke for others to gossip over." I smiled indifferently. "I'll go along with it." George wanted to say more, but his phone rang suddenly. I vaguely heard Shirley's name. Then his expression changed. "Got it, I'll be right there." His tone was urgent. He hung up and looked at me again. "Vivian, wait for me to come back and talk." But I didn't wait for him. I went straight to George's mother. I didn't hide anything, nor did I exaggerate a word. I just repeated what Shirley said verbatim. Back then, George's mother couldn't accept the infertile Shirley. She reluctantly accepted me into the family under pressure from the elders. For the past 3 years, she treated me neither warmly nor coldly but never mistreated me. She was actually very happy when she found out I was pregnant. But now, her grandchild was gone. I think, even if she hates me, she would hate Shirley even more now. Shirley wants to get back with George. But she will never get past George's mother. Shirley was right about one thing. I am not a kind person. I am very petty. I want the people I like to only have eyes and hearts for me. And I want the people who hurt me to never live happy lives. Because when they hurt innocent people, they never had any mercy or guilt. George's mother is a very decisive woman. Just like years ago when she decisively broke them apart and forced Shirley to marry far away. Now she took action again. George and I soon ended our marriage legally. And under George's mother's pressure, Shirley's family forced her to marry someone else. Rumor has it she even attempted suicide. George stayed by her side in the hospital for a day and a night. It said that George is determined to marry Shirley. George's mother slapped him twice and threatened to disown him. But all of this had nothing to do with me anymore. I went back to a small town far away with Grandma. We renovated and cleaned up Grandma's yard, planning to plant roses all over the yard in the spring. When I finished my confinement, George suddenly came looking for me. Grandma didn't open the gate. He stayed outside for a long time, leaving only at dawn. Early the next morning, when I went to get milk, I saw him again. In early winter, he wore only a thin coat, while I was wrapped in Grandma's cotton robe because I was cold. See, we are always like people from two different worlds. The neighbors stared curiously at him, not daring to approach. After all, in our small town, it's rare to see such a handsome and wealthy man. I gave him a glance and then looked away. I was once attracted to his looks in my youth and foolishly married him without hesitation, but after all, marriage is like drinking water, you know its warmth and coolness yourself. I accepted and acknowledged my self-chosen path. George didn't say anything but followed me all the way. I got the milk, bought breakfast, and returned. He followed me all the way back to the gate. "Vivian," he finally said, calling my name. I didn't stop, pushed open the gate, and was about to close it. George stepped forward and blocked it with his hand. "Vivian, Shirley is getting married next spring." Growing up, I never really got angry with people. I even never quarreled with anyone. But this time, I suddenly acted out. I poured the warm milk over his head. His expensive coat and cashmere sweater were stained. He looked bewildered, frowning tightly. "Vivian." "George, if the person she's marrying next spring is you, I'd still respect you as a man. But it seems you don't love her that much. After all, giving up the heir status at the George family would allow you to marry her and you can't give that up." Vivian's words were only half true. He indeed didn't love Shirley that much. But not because he couldn't let go of the heir status. He really, a long time ago, stopped liking her like he did when he was young. After Vivian got pregnant, George actually thought about it. The three of them could live together, happily. That disgusting and despicable thought, he would bury in his heart forever. Out of sympathy and pity, he crossed the line with Shirley late at night in a foreign land. In a moment of impulse, he promised Shirley a child and marriage. But actually, he regretted it early on. Then Shirley told Vivian. Without hesitation, she got rid of the child. And at the moment he found out the child was gone, George had only one thought. That was, he couldn't keep Vivian. Like a rose, once it falls, it's gone. But in their marital home, Vivian was everywhere. The servants often casually mentioned what Madame liked, what Madame wanted, what Madame would say and himself. Every time he came home at 6. Knowing she was already gone, he still hoped she would come out and greet him. He once thought Vivian was like a bland, always lukewarm cup of water at 45 degrees. An unimportant presence. But how can a person live without water? He often thought of their last dinner together. The way she looked after drinking a little fruit wine. The color of her lipstick that day was very pretty. He often wondered if he had held her hand while walking later. If he had hugged her from behind? If he had softly called her honey? Would she have softened and given him another chance? He also often wondered if he hadn't forgotten to pick her up that rainy day. If he had appeared in front of her in time. Would the story's ending have completely changed? But talking about it now doesn't mean anything. He could only tell himself to move forward. Vivian was still single. Vivian had rejected many suitors. Vivian used to love him very, very much. Once or twice a year, he would visit her. But on his 9th visit, the same story played out. But the main character was no longer him. The rain was pouring down, just like that time he forgot to pick her up. But this time, the main character didn't make the same mistake. In the midst of the heavy rain, the man's car stopped steadily. Vivian stood under the eaves, sheltering from the rain. When she saw the car approaching, she wanted to run to it. But the man waved his hand to stop her. He first got out in the rain, getting soaked to get an umbrella. Then he quickly walked to her, holding the umbrella tilted all toward her. He protected her as she got in the car first. It was such a short distance, only 2 or 3 steps. But the man didn't want her to get a single drop of rain. He'd rather get wet himself. George just sat in his car, staring dumbly at that scene. The wipers moved back and forth rapidly. The whole world seemed engulfed by the rain. The car carrying Vivian sped away, never to be seen again. And the torrential rain from years ago. The rain where he forgot Vivian, now drenched him thoroughly. George gave a bleak smile. He started his car and turned around. The car shot through the dense rain like an arrow. In a fleeting moment, he seemed to see the once young and innocent Vivian. Back then, they had just gotten engaged. His mother didn't like her, but his grandmother did. When they got engaged, his grandma told her, "Vivian, if George bullies you, tell Grandma. Grandma will back you up." So at that time, when he made her shy, she would always say, "I'll tell Grandma on you." He couldn't help but smile. He thought about their wedding night. She cried from the pain, and he hugged her, teasingly said, "Why don't you say you'll tell Grandma now?" She laughed and cried, then angrily pounced on him and bit him. He kissed her, and she obediently closed her eyes under him. George finally understood. Actually, the first time he met Vivian, he had already liked her, but sadly, people often sigh and regret when the flowers fall. Yet when the flowers are blooming, they don't seem very happy or cherish them. The year after Vivian and he divorced, all the roses in their marital home withered. But in the small town miles away, the garden of her grandmother's yard was full of blooming roses. But those beautiful flowers no longer belonged to him. George suddenly looked up. He was afraid he would tear up embarrassingly. Amidst the pouring rain. In the new life Vivian had started.